Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. Reporting live here in Smalls here in New York City. Tonight you're going to witness the sounds of the Jim Snidero Quartet. And what is very interesting about Jim's alto saxophone style is he reminds me a lot of swinging Phil Woods meets a very analytical and very laid-back Lee Konitz. Tonight we're going to talk about how he creates and writes compositions, as well as talk about his latest Savant Records CD. This is your brand new CD on the Savant label, and this is a very interesting ensemble because that last song that you played kind of takes me back to that Chico Hamilton, Gabor Szabo, Charles Lloyd type of unit.
Yes. Well, Charles Lloyd is a genius artist. I mean, so that's a very high compliment. Yeah.
Tell me about the writing for this group, because this is the second album or the second disc that you recorded with this unit.
Well, as I've said in the liner notes, I was very interested in the guitar. You know, I've made all of my records before Crossfire. The one before this was for keyboards, either for organ or piano. And I just wanted to do something different, and you get into a kind of a more sparse texture. And then with the acoustic guitar, it's a very warm kind of underpinning and delicate sound that you can really, I think it blends very well with the alto saxophone. So there's kind of these timbres going on that complement each other, and you can get inside the sound of it very well. And it's not a dominating sound, but it's very warm and still has presence. And it's hard to get, some instruments can be very shrill, or the piano is of course one of the greatest, if not the greatest instrument ever invented, but it's a very strong, present instrument, so you have to work with that. In the guitar, you can just look at the size of the grand piano and look at the size of the acoustic guitar, and you can see that. So I was very interested in writing for those textures and trying to, get a group sound with it.
You've written for different variations of ensembles, for strings, the trio, and now the quartet. Which do you feel comfortable writing for?
I try to write good music. I feel comfortable. I mean, it's not that you're always learning and struggling with trying to create something that's interesting and beautiful. So there's not comfortable. I would never say I'm quite comfortable with anything, but you just get inside the ensemble and the sound of the ensemble and kind of develop a group sound in your head. Sometimes a tune might take months to come up with, and then sometimes there's a tune on the record that we're going to do next set called One by One, and that is, like cats talk about, sometimes that came to me in 15 minutes. Other times I struggle with 4 measures for 4 weeks. So you just never know how that's going to go. But it's a matter of study and concept, really.
Just your solos, just your playing style. I haven't heard an alto saxophonist play like that in a while. I mean, you're a cross between, you swing like Phil Woods, but you're very analytical and very laid back like Lee Konitz.
Those are some big names you just mentioned. Well, Phil Woods I knew when I was a kid. He was very, very nice to me, a big influence on me when I was a very young man, and I owe him a lot. When I went to college, I started getting into Train, Charlie Parker, Cannonball, basically Train's group and Miles's group in the 60s, 50s, and 60s were huge influences on a lot of guys that I was hanging around with back in college 30 years ago. And so those became a kind of a predominant influence for me, and we were trying to abstract those sounds as Train and Miles did in the mid and late 60s. They started really becoming more dissonant and abstract. But then when I came to New York, I kind of I started working with brother Jack McDuff, and I had to kind of revisit straight ahead playing because that's what the gig called for, and playing with Jack was a dream for me, especially back then when the business was, music was, jazz was really on a down slide in the early 80s. So I did that for a while, and then in the 90s I started getting into all kinds of different music, and then did the Strings record in 2001. And I think in the last 10 years or so I've probably developed into my own style. You're always using influences. I mean, that's what makes art. You try to use those influences and create your own, and then draw from, it doesn't, kazoo player, it doesn't really matter. You're taking things, I'm very influenced by trumpet players, piano players, and that's how it's always worked. Freddie Hubbard talked about how he wanted to play like a saxophone player. You can hear it in his playing at times where he's really playing saxophone lines. But in the end, you're just trying to be yourself and say something principally interesting to yourself. I mean, when I play and I know everybody else, you're just trying to keep yourself interested in what you're doing, and hopefully that's interesting to other people,
of the things that you're known for is that you're a very accomplished composer, writer. What gives you the influence to just put together songs? What are the muse that gets you going?
Man, it's hard. It's you read about the struggle that writers, novelists have, or anybody that's a painter or something, and sometimes the inspiration comes to you right then and you feel it. Other times you work with a little germ or cell of notes or something like that, or maybe a concept of a groove. And often when I'm writing for a record, I'm thinking about also the compositions complementing each other, so that it still sounds like a group. I mean, each song sounds like it came from the same group, but there's a variation of tempo and texture and key and minor and major and all of that kind of, when you listen to the record, it doesn't get old. That the one tune leading to the next tune doesn't sound what's the word? Like I said, it just doesn't complement each other. So it's very hard, I think, to compose an entire record of original music. I think it's very, very difficult, because to sustain that intensity and interest without relying on standards that are very beautiful, and most of my records for quite some time have had a couple of standards on there, but I'm really not interested in that anymore. But on the other hand, it's a big challenge, because it's easy to have dead spots on a record, and so it's very, very, you have to be very careful about how you put the whole thing together.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report, reporting live here at Smalls here in New York City. I'd like to personally thank Jim Snidero for his time, as well as the staff and management here at Smalls. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Until next time, peace.